beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the King, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Madam Clerk, please administer oath to the new senator.
I, Didier Felician Shelton Daniel, do solemnly affirm that I will be faithful to bear true allegiance to St. Lucia, that I will uphold and defend the Constitution and the laws of St. Lucia, and I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of St. Lucia.
Welcome, Senator Daniel. Announcements. Good morning again, Senators. I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following motions and bills were passed in the House of Assembly and forwarded to the Senate for its concurrence. Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to authorize the Minister of Finance to guarantee borrowing by St. Jude Hospital. Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to authorize the Minister of Finance to guarantee borrowing by the Millennium Heights Medical Complex. Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, building public health resilience, coronavirus disease 2019 response project. Suppression of escalated crime, police powers. Constitution of St. Lucia, Amendment Number 2. Credit reporting. Registration of supervised entities. Anti-terrorism amendment, companies amendment. I've also received excuses from Senator Lisa Joahir and the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science and Technology, and Vocational Training, who are out of state and so are unable to attend today's sitting. Senators, before you, or maybe a little later, are copies of a Commonwealth message from Buckingham Palace and Commonwealth Day affirmation, that's in observation of Commonwealth Month. I also wish to inform you, Senators, that I participated in the Taiwan Gender Equality Week 2023 in New York. from the 7th to the 9th of March. The agenda included a Taiwan night which celebrated women in technology, and it featured a fashion show. And I also participated in a panel discussion on promoting gender equality in the digital age. Statements from ministers, parliamentary secretary. Papers to be laid. Honorable Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Innovation, and Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Morning, colleagues. Before I do, Madam President, I beg leave briefly to congratulate our temporary senator, Senator Daniel, for joining us this morning, and I look forward to his contribution. I also wish to ask that we keep in our prayers our colleague cabinet member, Honorable Joachim Henry, who is recovering from illness. Madam President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument number 22 of 2023, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Windjammer Landing Company Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 23 of 2023, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, building capacity and resilience in the health sector to respond to the coronavirus. Statutory Instrument number 24 of 2023, Tourism Incentives, Niemeyer Moore Order. Statutory Instrument number 25 of 2023, Price Control Amendment number 4 Order. Statutory Instrument number 26 of 2023, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 number 4 Order. Citizens by Investment Annual Report number 2021-2022, Export St. Lucia Annual Report April 2020 to March 2021. Statutory Instrument number 21 of 2023, Accreditation Act Commencement Order.
Bills. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, as should have been motions, I would like to, at this point, ask for the House, or the Senate, sorry, to suspend Standing Order 12 in order to change the order of the other people or business in the stated therein, and to allow the debate of the Suppression of Escalation of Crimes Police Powers Bill to take place, to proceed, to take precedence over the motions.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 12 be suspended in order to change the order of business as stated thereon, and to allow the debate on the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Bill to take precedence over motions. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers.
Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers. Madam President, this morning, today, is a day where, as a country, we are faced with an extraordinary, serious, and very unique situation which requires extraordinary, unprecedented, and serious intervention. Madam President, this bill, as it is presented this morning, is intended to allow this government, and particularly the police, to be able to address the situation that we are now faced with, a situation that we will all agree has caused quite a lot of anxiety, pain, and concern, for want of a better word, to all facets of this country, albeit it is concentrated in a particular area at this time. But I think all of us as a nation can in some way relate to the issues, the concerns, and the consequences that we may face if something is not done now, and I mean right now. Madam President, the situation I'm referring to is a sudden escalation in violent crime, particularly gun violence, in the community of Vieux-Fort. Not necessarily started only in Vieux-Fort, but has been elevated and escalated in the recent days or the past week. Madam President, this situation has threatened the safety and comfort of residents. Sports meets have had to be cancelled. It has disrupted business activity. It has disrupted the operations and the comfort of people who have to provide us with our health services at the hospital, St. Jude Hospital. People have been overwhelmed, particularly the hospital, with the cases, the casualties that come in as a result of these incidents. And so, Madam President, the situation is real. The circumstances are exceptional. And therefore, consequently, it calls for urgent, decisive, and firm action. It also calls for responsible action. And so we have decided as a government that to ensure that the actions that will be taken are lawful, and to ensure that procedures are followed in accordance with the law, we have come to this House and the Senate to pass this piece of legislation. Madam President, this piece of legislation will take effect for a particular period of time, and it will give the police officers, who are human beings, specific powers that will allow them to conduct certain procedures and activities to help arrest, no pun intended, the situation as it is in Vieux-Fort. Madame Président, je voulais dire bon matin, nous avons une situation dans le pays nous qui a fait un chai différents divers monde et diverses organisations en société bah yo assez la peine. Monde a trouvé fusillé, maman a trouvé faut yo partir ça à l'école. Nous avons monde qui est à l'hôpital, qui a travaillé à l'hôpital, pas ça fait opération yo quand yo ni pour faire. Et puis quand le gouvernement nous est nécessaire pour venir au Parlement pour passer loi qui baille les autorités police habilité pour ça faire certains bagailles pour faire pour abolir le problème ça là. And so, Madam President, in addition to this piece of legislation that we're asking to be passed today, the government has embarked on a number of other initiatives to try to curb the problem, not only in Vieux-Fort, but the problem of crime and violent crime in the country. Madam President, as I speak, the Regional Security Services is involved and is being engaged on the ground, as was mentioned by the Prime Minister, and we have to thank them for their prompt response. All of the governments of the region were very prompt and willing to provide their support. Madam President, the French authorities have also responded, and to them we also say thank you. We also have to be mindful that the fire services, the emergency services, who are also under pressure. We tend to think of the police in those situations, but we must remember also that every time there is a casualty, there is a report of a shooting or somebody is injured, that emergency personnel are also in the line of fire, because sometimes they get to the site even before the police. And so they too have had to be unduly affected and been under pressure to respond to these situations. Madam President, in addition, we have to recognize that these interventions are basically short-term. What this bill seeks to do is to arrest the situation as it is right now. This bill on its own, Madam President, is in no way going to be the panacea or the total solution for crime and deviant behavior. As I mentioned, there are a number of other initiatives that the government is undertaking, but this bill requires or will provide the platform for the immediate and short-term intervention that is needed. Madam President, just by way of example, some of the other measures that the government is engaging in include improving or providing additional resources for the police, and we heard mention of 150 bulletproof vests that have been given. We have also heard that the training vault that was not funded at all, zero funding for, has now received financial support to the extent of, or to the tune of $300,000 to increase our human capacity, our manpower on the ground. We've also heard, or we've also been told by the Minister for Health, that work has commenced on a number of our primary health care facilities, which only serve to help relieve our main hospitals from the stresses that can free them up to address and attend to emergencies. So, Madam President, the Grosley or Northern, the polyclinic, the respiratory hospital, a number of the other health service providers are getting an upgrade. Madam President, in addition, we have interventions and improvements that are being undertaken in some of our police stations, including the Northern Divisional Headquarters in Grosley, the Vieux-Fort police station that was somehow allowed to deteriorate to the extent that the police officers had to move to another temporary residence where it's been rented. They need that space to operate. How much it would have helped right now, Madam President, we will never know. We also know that the other police stations and facilities that operate in other parts of the country, once they are operational and well kept, will relieve the central and the bigger stations or the bigger units that can give them some space to breathe. Pretty much like the way the health system works. Madam President, one other area that I think we must keep in mind as we discuss this bill, and I believe that it is something we need to look ahead to do. Coming out of a background of education and dealing with the ripple effects of social issues in schools, there is always going to be the psychological impact of these events on the minds of innocent persons, particularly young persons, children. And we also look forward to ensuring that the young persons, elderly persons, and other individuals who may not have been involved but are impacted by the gun violence and the other incidents will have to be considered for counseling and professional intervention because of the trauma that they may have experienced during that time. And so, Madam President, I think that kind of trauma, that kind of experience, we may think that it may be limited to Vieux-Fort, but I can tell you, some of us who don't live in Vieux-Fort can also relate to what happens when these kinds of incidents take place. I suspect, Madam President, even yourself would have had at least one relative who was a victim, and I'm sure you may still be experiencing, some kind of emotional distress when these things happen. In this very Senate as well, Madam President, one of my colleague senators, I'm not even sure if I'm going to muster the courage to be able to speak on this bill this morning, because one of the shootings that took place in Vieux-Fort occurred in her workplace. And I had to, I was very moved because we have some serious connection when I saw her being interviewed on TV and having to explain and describe what happened. Madam President, these are very serious issues that impact on our lives. And if people like us who are adults, who are grown, who have some measure of understanding on how we can cope, are affected to that extent, can you imagine what can happen to a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or 4-year-old child who is living in the middle of one of those little spaces within the town and whose parent or friend or neighbor has had to go through this? Madam President, I say all of this to establish a basis for the urgency, the importance, and the need for us to move decisively and immediately to get this piece of legislation passed so that the police can be given the necessary powers to deal with the situation as is. Now, Madam President, the bill provides quite a bit of detail, and it was circulated. I think that for the purpose of this conversation, the bill makes provisions for a number of interventions. And when it was first circulated, there were some issues that were raised by various individuals and stakeholders, and that resulted in some changes that led to some amendments that were made in the lower house when the bill was presented. And that we thank those who had made the interventions to make those amendments, and we look forward to getting that piece of legislation passed today so that the police can be given the necessary powers to be able to conduct the operations necessary. Once that is done, Madam President, the long-term, medium and long-term strategies that will support that action to maintain a level of order, confidence, and peace in these communities will follow. And so, Madam President, I know my colleagues will elaborate. I want to present this piece of legislation, the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Bill, for consideration by this Senate today to be passed to achieve the goal that it was intended to achieve. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Bill be read a second time. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I sat and waited. I want to say that...
As the rebuttal?
Well, I sat and waited. Look right.
No. I was just having a discussion across with
Madam
the
President,
independent to see whether you wanted me to go or not. And
Senator,
I just want to make sure.
Senator.
I thought because...
Senator.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you put off your mic, please?
Sure. Go ahead.
The statement was read, and presiding officer waited, looked around, there were no lights on. The leader of government business light came on, and I called him. I will now have to ask the leader of government business whether he's ready to yield. If he is not, he has to continue. So question is whether the leader of government business wishes to yield.
Madam President, if I can just rise with a bit of clarity. On many instances, I've looked at the leader of government's business format, and what would happen, he would read opening statements, and then he would go on to explain in greater detail. There are many times I've put on my mic a bit too early. So I thought that you were going on to do an extra explanation on the bill like you normally do. So I didn't realize that you were that. So thank you.
Madam President, this morning I will be a little unconventional. I stood, read the bill, provided a detailed explanation that went on for more than 10 minutes, and then I took my seat. My colleagues applauded. That is very, very well understood. I took my seat and I waited. And there was no other person, so I sought your permission. And at this point, I will not yield, Madam President.
Proceed.
So, Madam President, having offered this explanation, I wish to ask for the support of this chamber to allow this bill to go through and to be enacted for the purpose that it was intended for. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide police officers with additional powers for the suppression of escalated crime and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Application of this act.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Purpose.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Madam President, just so we... Yeah, so Madam...
We go back to clause 2?
If we can, yes, please. In clause 2, the following amendment was proposed in the lower chamber, and I need to inform the Senate of these amendments. In clause 2, the removal of chairperson means that the chairperson of the tribunal under section 22, that's what it means. And also in clause 2, E, page 7, we should delete the words or C and replace with C and A.
So you have to leave the word. So instead of you have to remove the word or.
Okay, so just to make sure it's correct, it should be C or A. Yes? Land C or A. Or A, yeah. So that means it's inclusive of all three. Yes. Also, in part 1, designation of the escalated crime area, clause 5, line 1.
That's page 7 still,
Page
Senators?
7. Yes, we're still on page 7.
Yeah, but we're not on interpretation.
Okay.
We came out of that, so it's on the purpose.
Clause 3.
Clause 3.
Application of this act.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Purpose.
Okay. So, Madam President, we now look at line 1 on in clause 5, the designation of the escalated criminal area. After the comma, we should insert or add the words, after consultation with the Commissioner of Police.
We all there, Senators? The Minister may, after consultation with police by order published in the Gazette, etc. We all there? We may proceed? Okay. Clauses 5 to 6. Pardon? Part 1, clauses 5 to 6.
Designation of an escalated crime area.
Part 1, clauses 5 to 6 is part of the bill. Part 2, clauses 7 to 14.
Madam President, sorry.
Police powers for suppression of escalated crime.
Madam President, in part 8, we look at clause 7 under police powers for suppression of escalated crime. The first line, we should replace the word within with the word entering. Okay. So it would read a person with whether
within or entering.
You have to remove the word outside.
Yeah. So it means a person, it would now read a person whether within or instead of outside entering an escalated crime area shall stop if required
To stop.
to stop by a police officer.
Okay, senators, we all have this. A person whether within or entering an escalated crime area shall stop. We all on, senators? Yes. Okay. That's it for you?
Okay, and also clause 8, 1B, the first line, we should add the words or regulate after the word prohibit.
Or regulate the use.
Well, regulate the use, yeah.
Okay.
After prohibit.
Okay, so B1, prohibit, after prohibit, the words are included, or regulate the use. That's on
Okay,
page.
clause 8, page 9, Madam President. 4B1, in the first line, the word design should be added after the word object. So we should insert that word.
Could you read the entire sentence, please, Senator?
9B1. Where it reads.
9B1. So that's that. 9B1B. Yeah, and then you have to add an ED and area.
Okay, so I'll just make sure I stick to my notes so I get it right, Madam President. Again, it now reads under B1, removes any sign, instrument, light, or other object, and you remove to and you replace with design to inform another person of the prohibition or cordoned area. So it will not be cordoned, but cordoned with an ED area.
Cordoned area.
For clarification, can I just say, is it design or designed?
Designed.
Designed,
Yeah,
past
ED.
tense.
Designed to consistent with cordon.
Okay.
Also, there's no design. There's no design. It's just B.
It's just B. Yeah. It's just B.
Just, it's B. Okay, page 9, it's A, 4A, and it's B. Yes? Okay. We move on. Part 2.
On page 10.
Okay, so still in that clause, page 10. Bear with me, Madam President, we need to take our time about this one. Clause 10.2, yeah? The last line in clause 10.2, replace the words for a period as he or she thinks fit. If you look at the last line there, replace that with a slightly longer statement, and it reads as follows: for a reasonable period that allows him or her to exercise his or her functions. And therefore, if I can read the entire statement.
Yes, please.
Beginning with, in accessing land or a building under subsection 1, a police officer may enter into and remain in occupation of the land or building yeah? So I can continue?
Yes.
Let me just start again. I think you have...
Read it over so everybody gets it, yes.
So it should read on the page 10, 10.2, in accessing land or building under subsection 1, a police officer may enter into and remain in occupation of the land or building, and instead of for a period there, it should read, for a reasonable period that allows him or her to exercise his or her functions.
Part 3, clauses 15 to 19. Madam Clerk? You read it? Yes. Part 3, clauses 15 to 19.
Offenses for the suppression of escalated crime and detention.
Part 3, clauses 15 to 19, since part of the bill.
Aye.
Madam, listen, madam. Did we
accept the full.
Did we accept 8 to
10-2.
We didn't accept part 2 in the first.
10-2.
Oh, we have not done part.
Did we accept that part 2 was part of the bill? Because we did the amendments, but I don't think we.
She didn't accept.
We go back to part 2?
Just the question.
Okay. Part 2, clauses 7 to 14 stands part of the bill. Okay. Part 3, clauses 15 to 19.
Offenses for the suppression of escalated crime and detention.
Part 3, clauses 15 to 19 stands part of the bill.
Okay, Madam
You have
President.
amendment?
There's an amendment in 19, and it's as follows. 19.2. If we go to 19.2, I'll just read it as was. A person detained under subsection 1 shall be detained in such place, whether within or outside of the escalated crime area, and for a period not exceeding, it said 72 hours, as authorized by the Commissioner of Police. The proposal is the third line, to replace 72 hours with 144 hours.
Madam President, might I suggest that we remain with the original wording of 72 hours? The reason for that is that the Constitution is express with regard to your ability to detain persons, and it limits it to 72 hours unless you go to the courts to get an extension. I believe as drafted originally, it recognized that because it makes provision for an ex parte application to be made to extend the detention. By going to 144 hours, we risk falling afoul of the Constitution.
Madam President, I just need to respond to that. That particular situation can also create an issue where a third party, a judge or someone else other than the police, can intervene. And in that particular case, if a suspect is apprehended, say on a Thursday, the 72 hours that have elapsed on a Sunday, getting a judge or being able to access that particular third party may pose another problem, which may force the authorities to have to release that person. And if we have to think of the situation as is in Beaufort, you would not want to be faced with that particular dilemma. And this is why we thought it was better to allow, yes, we know it's not the best situation, but to allow for that particular amendment to be made for that particular circumstance. So I would hope that we can, for that particular case, agree to insert the 144 hours rather than leave it to a third party that could inconvenience everybody, depending on the day that the person is arrested.
Senator?
Time to respond, Madam President? Because I recognize obviously, but Madam President, I mean, to be honest, this is what currently applies. There are ways and means of achieving the ends and securing the person for an extended period other than the 72 hours. Because this is the, currently, and defense attorneys face this all the time. It's very common that persons are picked up on a Friday, held over the weekend, no access until Monday. I'm not saying that's what we should be doing, but the fact is we do operate already in a circumstance, and there are ways and means of ensuring that a judge is available to get the extension if necessary. I'm just giving the caution, Madam President, and the chamber will decide how they proceed.
Yes, the chamber will decide. And so,
yes, Madam President, I think that issue has been raised. It was raised by an attorney who was part of the discussion. We took that into consideration, but due to the situation as is, if that happens, then we're going to create a little bit of opening for a lot of things to go wrong. But I think the honourable member's position is well noted, and I would wish to say, even with that in mind, that we proceed respectfully.
we proceed. Question. Part 3.
Number 4.
Part 4, clauses.
Yes, so let me now, can I now move to under 19, 19.3. If we look at the third line, we've been asked to delete the words of the following in the third line. And in the fourth line, we delete the words being conditions issued in written directions to that person, and replace that with including the following.
Okay, so page 14, or 4, Senators, it starts with a judge may. On the third line, delete subject to any of the following. These 6 words will be deleted, and it continues as the judge thinks fit, removing the remaining being conditions issued in written directions to that person, and is replaced by including the following. Are we on the same page? Are we? Senator Jean?
19.4.
It should be 19.4, not 19.3.
When I read, Madam, I did indicate 19.3, but the actual clause there is 19.4.
Okay, page 14, section 19.4. Okay, are we on the same page?
They have some more.
Okay, so Madam President, if we can now move to page
15.
19.4E. And then in that particular clause, we remove the Commissioner of Police may in writing issue to the person revoke or vary any such direction. So that is with reference to clause 19.4E.
The entire phrase is deleted.
The entire phrase is deleted and replaced with this. And then also 19.4E, 19.5, we remove whether or not the direction is revoked in consequence of the failure.
Okay.
That particular one is removed.
Okay, Senators.
So you want to read it?
Section 5, whether or not the direction is revoked in consequence of the failure.
Yes.
Are we there? We move on?
Yes, madam.
That's it with you, leader of government business?
Yes, madam.
Part 3, clauses 15 to 19, that's part of the bill.
Aye.
Did I hear everyone's response?
Aye.
Thank you, Senators. Part 4, clauses... Pardon.
Sorry, madam, go ahead.
Part 4, clauses 20 to 22.
Miscellaneous.
Madam President, under clause 22, page 16, regulations, we're looking at inserting a new subsection. So we have 2 subsections. We would like to insert a 3rd subsection, and it would read, regulations made under subsection 1 are subject to the
Go a little slowly, Senator, to allow...
Okay, let me slow down.
Yes.
I am saying that in this particular clause, we would like to insert a new subsection to be called subsection 3. And that subsection would read, regulations made under subsection 1 are subject to affirmation resolution of the Parliament. So regulations would have 3 subsections.
Are we on the same page, all Senators? Okay, we move on. Part 4, clauses 20 to 22 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1,
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Bill went through committee without amendments. The amendments were made in the lower house. Here, we did not make any amendments, so we cannot claim that we've made amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Act 2023.
Motions. Honorable Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, and Leader of Government Business.
Yes, Madam President, just making sure that I have everything in the right order here.
Just take your time, Senator.
Motion 1. If I may just ask the clerk to verify with me before I read the motion. St. Jude Hospital. Okay. Thank you very much, Madam President. I beg to move the following motion standing in my name, now that I have the correct one. Whereas it is provided under Section 65(1), the Public Finance Management Act, Cap 1501, the Act, that the Minister of Finance may, by affirmative resolution of the Parliament, grant a guarantee in accordance with an enactment. And whereas it is further provided under Section 69(2) of the Act, that a guarantee issued by the government or a contingent liability created by the government in accordance with the regulations under the Act and in accordance with another enactment shall be charged and paid out of the consolidated fund. And whereas it is provided under Section 20A(1) of the St. Jude Hospital Act Cap 1120 that the Minister of Finance may, with the approval of the Parliament, guarantee in the manner and on condition as he or she thinks fit, the payment of the principal and interest of an authorized borrowing by the hospital. And whereas it is further provided under Section 20A(2) of the St. Jude Hospital Act Cap 1120 that where the Minister of Finance is satisfied that there has been default in the payment of a principal money or interest guaranteed, he or she shall direct the repayment out of the consolidated fund for the amount in respect of which there has been a default. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of EC 3,500,000 from the Republic Bank Eastern Caribbean Limited, the bank, to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. And whereas the payment of the advances are on demand, and whereas the interest is payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate, from time to time less than 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum. And whereas a commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter, be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of EC 3,500,000 from the Republic Bank Eastern Caribbean Limited to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. Be it further resolved, A, that repayment of the advances are on demand. B, the interest is payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate, from time to time less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum. C, a commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter.
Explanation.
Oh, there's an explanation, Mr.
So, Madam President, I just await the podium so I can provide further explanation. I just read provided the explanation. Madam President, by way of explanation, I just want to elaborate a little bit on the reason why we are here with this resolution seeking approval for borrowing this $3.5 million. Madam President, we are all aware, very much aware, of the health situation, and in my previous presentation, even when I spoke on the amendment, the bill that we passed, I made reference to the medical institutions and how much pressure they are under. And it is very important that we highlight the need for us to ensure that while we continue to grapple with the after effects of COVID and all the other issues that we face in the health sector, that we continue to lend support and give these institutions the tools to operate. Madam President, it may appear that for some of us, the effects, perhaps psychological or otherwise, of COVID, the psychological effects of other issues that land people in hospitals, and the financial and other implications may not be very apparent to most of us. But it is very clear that these somehow or sometimes amount to cost that is not on the forefront and is not always being discussed. But in our recovery efforts, Madam President, we know that it's necessary to continue to provide finance and support for the various expenses and challenges that come with our health sector. Madam President, there are goods and services that we need, that we continue to have to procure. You will notice that we have another motion a little later, Madam President, that also is related, Mr. Deputy, my apologies. Mr. Deputy, you will notice that we have another motion that is also going to be related to health and health resilience. That one is particular to the Millennium Heights. But it is important that we acknowledge the need to strengthen particularly our primary healthcare facilities. These days, the grants are not coming as we would like to. And so sometimes we have to find ways to finance our own health issues. We have also had conversation about universal health care, which apparently was on the back burner for a while. We have to bring this back because we still have persons who are not able to afford basic health privileges, basic health care. There's also the misguided perception, Madam President, or Mr. Deputy, that COVID is no more. Panic COVID occur. People just move around and, there's a sense of comfort that I think we should not get comfortable with because COVID is still with us. There's new variants and we have to be prepared in the event that there is some kind of outbreak. The external factors are still there. We do not control everything that happens, even within our own region, much less the external or the international region or the international world. We have a tourism industry where we still have arrivals. People are still coming into the country. I know we have done a lot in terms of improving the screening and people are getting their vaccines and so on, but the threat of COVID is still around. And so we cannot relax and just concentrate on only a few things and leave our health sector unattended. Madam President, medical equipment needs to be provided. We also have non-communicable diseases still with us, diabetes, hypertension. And if you have family members who suffer with these conditions, you will be very much aware, Mr. Vice President, of the kinds of expenses that are incurred, having to get insulin and we have to make those available to people at either free or in some way that it can be accessed easily. We know the issues that we face with in terms of the equipment that is available in our various healthcare facilities. And some of this will be used to purchase some of this equipment. I can provide a whole lot of examples, Madam President, but I want to make a basic point here, perhaps, and listen to my colleagues and then perhaps respond, that this facility basically allows for us to be able to beef up and improve the services that we provide in our primary health care. The vaccine issues are still with us. We have an issue with persons who are still vaccine resistant. They have this, conspiracy theory. It's still there. People, right, especially now that we don't have as many deaths and so on with COVID, people figure, well, we're okay. And so why get vaccinated now? And so we have to continue to push the message. We have to continue to invest in pushing the message that we should still encourage our citizenry to get vaccinated. And of course, at some other point, I will get to the vaccine too, where we still have to continue to procure those and make sure that we have reserves in the event we need more. Because we know that the last time we heard about procuring, the vaccines didn't get here. But I'll leave that one for another time, because I'm sure there's enough that my colleagues may want to go to discuss in that regard. But Mr. Deputy, I wanted to provide this brief sort of background rationale for this particular motion to make sure that we have it clear in our minds that this is really to almost a proactive step in ensuring that we provide and boost our healthcare system as we continue to recover from the effects, particularly of COVID. So I put this to the House, the Senate, for its consideration. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of EC $3.5 million from the Republic Bank, Eastern Caribbean Limited, to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. Be it further resolved that repayment and advances are on demand. The interest is payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate from time to time, less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum. A commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter. Senator Stanislas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, I rise to make my contribution to the motion as presented by the Leader of Government Business to guarantee borrowing of $3.5 million to the St. Jude's Hospital. Mr. Deputy President, the opposition understands the physical and operational constraints at the George Odlum Stadium, which houses the St. Jude's Hospital. It's been almost 14 years, Mr. Deputy President, since the dreadful fire destroyed St. Jude's and the hospital had to be relocated to the stadium. And therefore, we are all aware of the conditions and the situation over there. We hear of the problems from the staff, Mr. Deputy President, patients, and the general public. The problems, the issues they are faced with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and of course for the past 14 years. And therefore, Mr. Deputy President, we on this side of the House will and is in support of any assistance which the government can make available to St. Jude's in order to improve and further complement the services offered to the St. Lucian people. With that said, Mr. Deputy President, I support the resolution to guarantee the borrowing of $3.5 million to the St. Jude's Hospital. However, Mr. Deputy President, I would like to raise a few issues on the borrowing, the resolution which the Leader of Government Business have presented. And one of the issues I want to raise, Mr. Deputy President, is to ask the Leader of Government Business, what are some of the monitoring or reporting systems, if any, that are going to be put in place to ensure that those monies are spent for the right purposes? I know he gave an explanation as to what they were going to procure and so on, but is there any form of, any mechanism of monitoring by the Ministry of Finance or any other agency to ensure that the monies are well spent? Will there be a quarterly or semi-annually report, Mr. Deputy President? And I'm saying this, Mr. Deputy President, because you do not want people to believe or think that they can just go and use up the monies as if they are on a shopping spree. A lot of monies has been made available, and we want people to be conscious that the hospital is going through difficult times and the money must be spent wisely, Mr. Deputy President. As if not, we may very well be back here in this honorable house in the next 6 months, the next year, guaranteeing more monies, Mr. President. And I have no problems in guaranteeing more monies for St. Jude's, Mr. Deputy President. It's just that there must be proper oversight of the monies. So I don't know if the leader of government business in his rebuttal could assure the honorable chamber that there will be some form of reporting and monitoring system in place to ensure that monies are well spent from this guarantee, this borrowing. Mr. Deputy President, we also hope that the monies will not be used to create unnecessary positions and jobs for the boys and girls, Mr. Deputy President. We hope so, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, we hope that this money can be used to prioritize, as maybe priority number one, the purchase or the proper repair of the floor model X-ray unit at the hospital. This one is very, very important, Mr. Deputy President, because the current one has been done for almost a year, Mr. Deputy President, and only a portable X-ray unit is available and is very limited in what it can do at the hospital. Most of the X-rays at the hospital, Mr. Deputy President, have to be done at private facilities, which is costing patients a lot more than if they had to get it done at the hospital. It is also a burden, it is also a cost as well to the hospital with X-rays, because almost, people in the South could tell you, almost throughout the day, the ambulances are moving from the hospital to those places where the X-ray units are available privately. So that is a cost to the hospital in terms of maintenance of the ambulances and so on. So we're hoping that the monies can be used to prioritize either the repair or the purchase of this X-ray unit. This is a very, very important piece of equipment that we believe should be given proper attention to. So Deputy President, we're also hoping that the monies can be used to prioritize the purchase of reagents which are desperately needed for doing some key lab tests. Labs are there, equipment are there, Mr. Deputy President, but there is a serious shortage of reagents which are critical, which is probably the key ingredient in carrying out many of the lab tests at the hospital. So again, we need to prioritize and make sure we're able to get those. To the staff, and especially the security department staff at St. Jude's, and the family of a security officer whom I was told passed away last night. And I'm hoping that it was not as a delay of the results of tests from a private facility which he was awaiting, but my sincere and deepest sympathies to his family, the security department, and Mr. Deputy President. The operative issues are numerous, Mr. Deputy President. Medication which is needed to private pharmacies, even when sometimes they are in critical care, the hospital doesn't have it, and persons are on the dying beds, and families have to be running around trying to get the medication to bring in. That is a problem, Mr. Deputy President, and we're hoping that the monies can be used to procure more medication to have in the pharmacy at the hospital. You have a shortage, Mr. Deputy President, of bed sheets, pillows, pillowcases, and so on. And these are very critical. You will hear reports of families have to bring in those essentials from home into the hospital, Mr. Deputy President. So we're hoping that the monies can be used wisely to procure a lot more bed sheet sets, a lot more pillow sets, and so on for the hospital. The cafeteria, Mr. Deputy President, is another issue with the staff at the hospital. And there are days that the staff, they have to push their hands in their own pockets to get certain foodstuffs, certain essential items for the cafeteria, Mr. Deputy President. And we are hoping that the monies can be used to beef up the supplies in the cafeteria of the hospital, Mr. Deputy President.
Very well said.
Mr. Deputy President, I am saying all of this not to criticize or lay blame, but to bring forth some of the key constraints faced by the staff at St. Jude's on a daily basis. Bring forth their plight, their concerns, their complaints, their problems, so that it can be addressed. And compounding all of this, Mr. Deputy President, you have the staff with all the operating problems, the physical problems. You have the staff who are still awaiting payment of salary increases and back pay. So this is something that the government needs to look into, because the staff are very demotivated, they're frustrated, and many of them are leaving St. Jude's, Mr. Deputy President. And of course, if many of the staff leave and you are not able to get replacement staff, this is going to hamper the quality of service delivered at the hospital. So this is something that needs to look into. I do not think the $3.5 million is going to be able to help with salary increases and back pay, but the government should look at other means of tackling this issue in order to bring some form of relief to the staff and good cheer, and ensure that they can continue to serve the people of the South. There's also an issue of the subvention for the hospital. What has happened to the subvention? Is there any increase to the subvention for St. Jude's, Mr. Deputy President? This is something that needs to be looked into in order to assist the hospital with taking care of some of the problems and issues it is faced with. Mr. President, this $3.5 million is a help for St. Jude's, but this is just a drop in the bucket. It's not going to go very far, Mr. President. And if the government is to come back here next week, Mr. Deputy President, if the government is to come back here next month to guarantee another 5, another 8, another $10 million for St. Jude's, I will stand on my feet and overwhelmingly support that government. Because I believe that staff, the patients, the people of the South have gone through too much for the past 20 years, going through so much, and whatever else can be done to alleviate the problems and the issues, I'll more than happy to guarantee and support more guarantee for St. Jude's Hospital. As long as the President, the money will be spent wisely in order to cure some of the maladies which I have just alluded to. Mr. Deputy President, I also want to make mention of the screening exercise that St. Jude's had with the Shanghai Hospital. And this, I believe, this screening exercise was suspended during the height of the COVID pandemic. So we believe that it was a very valuable exercise, Mr. Deputy President, where the staff could gain training and expertise, and that the government should look into recommendations in this training exercise. The Shanghai Hospital So I don't want to mislead the leader of business who comment on this, maybe ask our DM Girard while she is up there to have a with the Taiwanese on that. Mr. President, it would be remiss of me not to thank and express our gratitude to the staff and medical personnel of St. Jude's for all what they're doing under difficult circumstances for the St. Lucian people, particularly the people of the South. We are forever grateful to them, Mr. Deputy President. And once again, Mr. Deputy President, with these words, I support the resolution and hope that the necessary oversight and priorities will be put in place to ensure that the monies are used wisely. I thank you, Mr. Deputy President.
Senator Shalry.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. No, I don't know. No. As I rise to make a very short presentation on the motion before us, I beg leave of you, Mr. Deputy President, to extend condolences to the families in Vieux-Fort who over the last few days have lost loved ones, and also to take this opportunity to implore the men and women of Vieux-Fort, understanding as much that the issue of crime and gun violence is not isolated to the Vieux-Fort area, but we must be honest in our deliberations to admit that the events of the last few days have been what we can consider unprecedented and what has caused quite a bit of unsettling within the community. Mr. Deputy President, it was in fact my intention this morning to present on the bill that we dealt with earlier. But as the leader of government business alluded in his presentation, the activities of the past few days have affected me in a very personal way. And so whilst I stand here today understanding that I have a duty to country, we cannot run away from the few days, Mr. Deputy President. And so, as a leader, as a public figure, I take this opportunity to implore our people that there are better ways to settle disputes. There are better ways to deal with issues that arise, ways that will not create an unsettling of an entire country, an entire community, Mr. Deputy President. And I think it's so connected that after we're dealing with the bill this morning, that we are dealing with a motion to approve this overdraft for the St. Jude's Hospital, because they are one of the entities who have been in the middle of this situation for the last few days, having to I know of a situation where a young boy in the gun violence was affected, a very young child, just being in a space where has always been safe for him, and he had to be taken to the St. Jude's Hospital. Thankfully, the injury was not very serious, and thankfully as well that the medical team at St. Jude's Hospital was able to deal with the issues presented, and he is home doing physically well, albeit very concerning about his psychological well-being and that of his family and those around him. So I just wanted to start by making that submission, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, healthcare is a national issue.
when we look at goods and provision of goods, we look at the difference between public goods and private goods. And of course, health care is a public good. And by that I mean a good or service that is provided to the public without the view to make a profit. And of course, the St. Jude's Hospital is one such entity as other medical facilities around the island who are responsible for providing a service, albeit not being able to make a profit, but ensuring that it is provided in a manner where people are comfortable accessing the services and knowing that when they do access the service that they are getting the best service. And so in order to be able to do that, Mr. Deputy President, there needs to be resources made available to that entity to ensure that it can carry out its responsibilities. And of course, the responsibility to ensure that these services are provided at a standard that is good enough to ensure that the health and safety of its people are promoted falls directly under a government, Mr. Deputy President. And so, like we have done in the near past, having come here in the name of the St. Jude's Hospital to ensure that equipment and services and are provided for the people, and not just the people of the South, Mr. Deputy President. And I have said here before that St. Jude's Hospital is very dear to my heart. As a daughter of the South of the island, it is very dear to my heart, Mr. Deputy President. But understanding that it's not just the South, but St. Lucia on the whole. And so I stand here today in support of the motion before us, Mr. Deputy President. As I sat across here, I listened to Senator Stanislaus on the other side of the House, Mr. Deputy President. And I must first admit that there are some issues that he raised that it is, in my opinion, are very vital issues. The issue of accountability, the issue of ensuring that monies are used for the intended purpose, which the bottom line of is to ensure that a better service is provided. It is something that I agree to, Mr. Deputy President, that there must be a proper level of oversight, a proper level of accountability to ensure that there is maximum use made of the monies, Mr. Deputy President. But the reality is that, you know, you wonder sometimes, were they there? Was he there? Was he there, Mr. Deputy President, when scarce resources of this country, at a time when the resources were even more contracted during the COVID period, that monies were spent to procure vaccines that have not touched down on the island of St. Lucia? Was he there, Mr. Deputy President? Was he there, Mr. Deputy President, when a cabinet that he sat in agreed to these exorbitant sums of money, Mr. Deputy President, for contracts and consultancies for things like a move from the Victoria Hospital to the OKEU Hospital, Mr. Deputy President? Was he there? And did he then recognize, Mr. Deputy President, that the St. Jude's Hospital already had an existing problem of no pillows? Mr. Deputy President, in 2014, I born my daughter, Mr. Deputy President, and I could not have delivered at the St. Jude's Hospital from the National Stadium, Mr. Deputy President. I was transported to the Victoria Hospital. It clearly says that back in 2014, Mr. Deputy President, late hani se kalte problem sa la St. Jude's, Mr. Deputy President. But the member opposite sat in a cabinet where these conditions existed at St. Jude's Hospital. Kiss I fair about it, kiss idea about it. Was he in the parliament and did he speak about it? And did he then ask that these resources that were used to do things like fake vaccine contracts, esi tema de Premier Ministre la, ministre santé aléa pour servir l'argent ça là pour mener soulagement by gens soud là dans l'hôpital St. Jude, Mr. President, Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, I carried my pillow to Victoria Hospital when I went there in 2014. I carried my pillow in that hired car from Viewfort. My family, my husband and my mother, they brought up bed sheets for me at Victoria Hospital. My daughter is going to be 9 years, Mr. Deputy President. So the problem existed, but the members sat down in a cabinet, and St. Jude's Hospital was not a priority for that government, Mr. Deputy President. And so whilst I agree that there are issues that need to be dealt with, and they need to be dealt with a level of experience, Mr. Deputy President, I ask myself, was he there? Was he awake? Was he aware? Is it a case of where it was not a priority for the government? But we come here and we postulate. We come here and for the sake of backbiting and for the sake of spreading that sense of lack of confidence, Mr. Deputy President, they now ask the questions. How convenient. Mr. Deputy President, the member opposite spoke of demotivated staff. He spoke of staff leaving the hospital. This is not a thing of the last 18 months. Sapa kuma say last this with moi, Mr. Deputy President. C'est ça c'est un bagay qui jate ka fait. And in between 2011 and 2016, under a previous St. Lucia Labour Party administration, under the National Initiative to Create Employment, there were additional St. Lucians under that program who were deployed to St. Jude's Hospital, who assisted in the delivery of better service at St. Jude's Hospital. I know many young persons from Beaufort who under that program were assigned to St. Jude's Hospital. But what did they do when they come in 2016, Mr. President? They dismembered them. They dismembered the entire program. A lot of these people were sent packing, Mr. Deputy President. They contributed to a better level of service at St. Jude's Hospital. I remember going to St. Jude's Hospital during the period, and there were persons to meet you and greet you and direct you properly. Persons who were under that program, the NICE program, but under a cabinet in a government where the member opposite sat, they dismantled these programs. And so it means that they decrease the level of service that was being provided by St. Jude's Hospital to the people of the South. But now he comes into the Honorable House and he postulates about what needs to be done. And there is something very significant he said, Mr. Deputy President, and I agree, and I want to highlight it. I want to ensure that it's reiterated. He said that the $3.5 million that is in this motion today is but a drop in the bucket, and I am the first to agree that it is. Hands up at the front of the line, cheerleader. It is a drop in the bucket, but $3.5 million as a drop in the bucket is something that this administration, who has continued to ensure that they put people first, is coming to this house and saying, let us start. But did they start? Did they start? $3.5 million a few years ago, and like he said, if the House comes again and say let's borrow more, he will agree let's borrow more. And so the question is it only now that we're realizing that St. Jude's needs that level of assistance, Mr. Deputy President? But I move on. Like I indicated before, I agree that there has to be a high level of oversight, and that the expenses that are going to be incurred, that they need to be strategic and they need to be purposeful, Mr. Deputy President. A few days ago, I saw a young lady, apparently she had access service at some healthcare facility, I'm not sure if it's St. Jude's Hospital, and she lamented the poor service and the lack of equipment and so on at the hospital. And her post went on further to say that this is why the previous Prime Minister was introducing national insurance. And I went back a few years ago when I sat in as a stakeholder representing the fishing sector at a consultation where the healthcare insurance was being discussed. And I remember as well that sometime in 2016, just after the 2016 general elections, the then Prime Minister indicated that Victoria Hospital and St. Jude's Hospital, along with many other health centers island-wide, are not up to standard in terms of the services that they provide to the general public. And again, it concretizes what the point I made earlier, that these issues have existed for far too long. They've been there. Mr. Deputy President, when they demitted office in 2021, these facilities were no more the better than when they inherited office. And the issue of the insurance was spoken about. But come to 2021, what happened to it? What happened to something that they deemed a priority during the campaign, but it never materialized within more than 5 years in office? But this administration, Mr. Deputy President, who have always insisted that the health of its people is a priority, have continued to show that not just St. Jude's Hospital, but the healthcare on the whole in this country is a priority. And we have seen the developments around the island. We've seen the improvements to primary healthcare facilities, Mr. Deputy President. We've seen almost every week the Minister of Health is in the media with a presentation of a new piece of equipment, and a lot of pieces of equipment, and some of them that I don't have a medical background, and so I learned a bit from the member opposite in terms of the different pieces of equipment and material he indicated are necessary or required for the proper functioning of services provided at the hospital. But I have seen over the last 18 months that very, very regularly the Minister of Health, I think he's probably one of the ministers who are always in the media because something is happening within the healthcare sector. Improvements to primary care health facilities, equipment being presented to the hospitals and so on. And so it means that things are happening, and the improvement of the facilities and so on are happening, Mr. Deputy President. And of course it's coming out of a period where we understand what transpired during COVID-19. And of course we understand as well that a lot of things that happened during COVID-19 were very reactive. And so, like I have said before, we need to now put ourselves in a position where we are preparing for the eventuality. And it's not that you're saying ikai feta ko a lot days as sky fet, but at the end of the day you have to prepare yourself for the eventuality of such a pandemic or other like occurrence, if it does happen, that you have created some level of cushion for your people where it comes to health care, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, again, like I started, I want to end by saying that it's very important that there is a mechanism for monitoring, budgeting, and reporting as it relates to not just these monies being borrowed, but the run-ins and the operations of the facility as a whole, so that perhaps we can get a better understanding of how these things happen. But we understand as well, and in the lower house, the Minister of Health alluded to some figures, and he indicated that there was a recorded drop from 69% of collection in 2019 to as low as 19% in 2022 in terms of collection of persons who access the facility at St. Jude's Hospital and the ability to pay or for the hospital to collect payment. And we know that it is something that has existed. Of course, if somebody goes to the hospital and they can't afford to do particular things, they will not be turned away. Some persons really can't afford to pay, but the hospital still has a responsibility, especially to these people, Mr. Deputy President, who cannot access perhaps private health facilities to ensure that they are well taken care of. And so I think that it's also time that the hospital starts looking at some kind of mechanism that will either help in the increase of collection or some other means of being able to offset the cost of the services provided for individuals vis-a-vis what can be collected. I remember back in the day, there were initiatives such as that persons who could not necessarily pay with money, they would probably use a barter system. I'm not sure if that still exists at St. Jude's. And I remember as a child, though I was never fortunate enough to attend St. Jude's Bazaar, but I'm pretty sure many persons remember the annual bazaar being held at St. Jude's at the original site right there on the ground where the structure now, the other structure now sits. that used to be the house and the spot for St. Jude's Bazaar. And maybe that is an initiative that the hospital can probably reintroduce to help with raising some much needed financing. Although we know it might be a stretch, but we also need to start looking at some sort of mechanism to make the hospital a little more self-sustaining. Because as much as I started, that government has a responsibility to ensure that these healthcare facilities are able to provide the necessary services, Mr. Deputy President. But we also understand that the access of money, the access of finance to even central governments, they continue to shrink over time. And so we have to bear in mind that with these patterns, we have to come up with other creative, sustainable ways in order to be able to bring in much needed revenue to these facilities to increase their efficiency, Mr. Deputy President. And so I am hoping that with this injection of funds, that these very things can be done, that the service provided, that the number of tests or the number of the type of equipment and so on available at the hospital will increase, which will reduce the occurrence of persons who really can't afford, because I think our focus has to be on those persons who cannot who cannot simply walk into Tapia Hospital or go to the other X-ray or labs available at Viewfort or in the north of the island to be able to carry out tests and so on. Some people really can't afford it, and they rely solely on the services at reduced cost provided by the public facility, Mr. Deputy President. And so with this, I wish to say again that I applaud the move by the government, and of course it has not been a piecemeal approach in that sense. It has been there. We have seen over the last few months, over the last few sittings, that there had been other initiatives geared towards St. Jude's Hospital, which has led us to this point today. And so it really, in my opinion, speaks to a real strategic focus of a government that has vowed to put people first, to ensure that that healthcare is one of the many main facets, just like education and social programs and so on, that this government continues to support and ensure that are made available to the citizens of this country. And so with this, I thank you, Mr. Deputy President.
Senator Fede.
Thank you, Mr. President. Note the rush with which I rush to put on my mic. You know, these days, Mr. Deputy President, the opposition is constantly being bridled, and they attempt to cover our voices. But Mr. President, you know, I want to, before I begin, beg you for a bit of latitude to express our sincerest condolences to the families of the victims of the spate of violence that is taking place in the south of the island right now. It is indeed a travesty.
Not to break your stride, but can we just take a short break whilst we get the rest of the senators back in?
bien, there was a slight interruption during the presentation or contribution by the Honorable Dominic Fede, Senator Dominic Fede, during his presentation.
May
I'm
proceed,
not sure
Senator.
what the issues were. All right, it's about to resume now.
Thank you, Madam President. So I was expressing my deepest condolences to the residents of victims that have been caught in the crossfire of the spate of violence currently afflicting the south of the island right now. I want to also express our deepest sympathy for those that are also going through other traumatic experiences as a result of this rather difficult time. I rise today, Madam President, to make a few comments on the bill, the motion rather, that is before us to borrow $3.5 million to finance operational expenses at the St. Jude's Hospital. My colleague, Senator Herod Stanislas, has done a most incredible and outstanding job in painting a very bleak picture of what obtains in one of the island's main hospitals. Madam President, the comments that I heard in criticism of the Senator's attempt to sound the voices of staff members who are obviously very concerned about the debilitating circumstances and the very strenuous conditions under which they had to work was well intended. I don't think he was trying to criticize. I don't think he was trying to score political points. What he was simply trying to do was to bring to this Senate's attention of the need for urgent and quick remedial action to take care once and for all of the many situations that are affecting the people, the workers, the patients, the wider communities of which we are here seeking to represent, so that we can have policies that will address their situation. That's what he was seeking to do. That's what he was trying to do. He was trying to establish the status quo. He was painting the picture as was reported to him by the staff of St. Jude's. The point is well noted that indeed the problems in our health sector, St. Jude's included, are chronic. They are decades old problems. What I thought that the senator would have said was that the government of the day is going to spare no effort to find solutions to the many problems that affect the nurses, the doctors, the patients, and the wider community. There is need for there to be confidence. There is need for inspiration. There is need for hope. And the petty politics is not going to solve the problem. And so, while we might say, well, the UWP also had no pillows, that doesn't solve the problem. Or while we're going to say, well, I went to Victoria Hospital and I carried my own pillows, that doesn't solve the problem. It is now time, you're almost in government for 2 years, to be on top of this situation, to say, well, this is our plan, this is how we're going to rectify a rather dire situation that is affecting the country. The responsibility is yours. You campaigned in an election, you told the people that you had the answers for the many problems that the people voted us out for. but yet you still want to go back and govern in the past. You still want to go back and look to the mistakes for what the UWP has made. And I'm preempting the other speakers because I know that that's how the political crosstalk will go. But, Madam President, I'm going to be the first to admit that both political parties have not adequately dealt with the St. Jude's problem. That's a fact. Both political parties have not addressed the healthcare sector in a manner that is adequate. So you could say what you want. You could say I had 5 or 20 years, right? The people have also looked at you as a failure in addressing their problems. So now what is important is how do we put our heads together and find solutions to address an untenable situation at St. Jude's. That's what's important. That's the critical thing. That's the political crosstalk doesn't solve any of the problems that is afflicting us at this time. And so, in that vein, Madam President, permit me to expound today on a few of these issues. So, the health sector has been plagued by underfinancing. Plagued. Madam President, I know that you would know this better than most in this House, based on your previous life and being a former Minister of Health and having to deal with inadequate budgets, all the health centers around St. Lucia, dealing with 2 national hospitals, one in the south, one in the north, having to import very expensive equipment, having to compete with other ministries and other social sectors for funding, namely education, social transformation, poverty alleviation, sports development. It hasn't been easy on this small island developing state to address the chronic need of the health sector. Coupled with that, you've had a problem where you train up nurses and then you're faced with a brain drain situation where nurses are attracted by bigger countries. They've been lured by higher salaries, better working conditions, and better contracts. And they go away after they are trained. And so whether it's Flabo or Labour in power, those problems are going to persist. So how do we get our way out of it? How do we untangle ourselves? How do we then manage and maximize the opportunities that exist amid all of these challenges that are currently facing the health sector presently? How do we deal with this problem of underfinancing? What is the strategy by the current St. Lucia Labour Party administration? Must be asked so that you can lay a solid foundation for any government that comes after you. That is the important question. What's the big plan? What's the comprehensive development plan that's going to ensure that the fiscal strategy of the country, that on the revenue side, that you're going to do so well so that rather than coming to borrow and take a loan for just $3.5 million, that you can say, we are able to finance this from our tax revenue. Because as my colleague has said, that this is less than 2% of your total budget, which is 1.8 billion. And one would have thought, right, based on your own reluctance and your strong criticism of borrowing, that you would go and pay this in cash. Because what you have been saying in previous sittings in Parliament is that you have said in your own words that you admire the stewardship of the Minister of Finance because he hasn't borrowed so far. I mean, what kind of... That is ludicrous. Every government has to borrow. Every government must borrow. In fact, today you're coming for over $50 million in one Senate sitting. In all of your your motions, you're coming for $50 million.
Senator Jean.
Madam President, the member is misleading the House.
You're standing on the point of order, Senator?
Yes, I'm
What
standing
is
on
your
the point of order. The member is misleading the House. There has never been said that the Minister of Finance has not borrowed. We cannot be coming here. We cannot be coming here and approving resolutions and say the Minister of Finance has not borrowed. The member is misleading the House. We have persistently said to the member that what he claimed was the intention of the Minister of Finance to borrow can only be justified after the financial year. I'm not late. I have been here from October, and so far we have approved resolutions, we have passed resolutions to borrow, but our assertion has always been that what the member presented as what was borrowed was an intention to borrow, and we're about 2 weeks before the end of the financial year and it has not been achieved. So the member needs to withdraw the statement that he made and be accurate in what he's presenting to this chamber. Thank you.
Senator Fede. Senator Jean has indicated that you have misled the House by indicating that the government side has never said that the government would not borrow, and so you have been asked to withdraw that statement which you made, that the government side indicated that the government will not borrow. So I'm asking for your response now that you withdraw, because I have not heard it in this House either.
Madam President, unfortunately, before I withdraw the statement, I'm going to say that that assertion is wrong and that I don't agree with your ruling, but I'm going to move on, okay? I withdraw the statement. Madam President, in the interest of my time and not disrupting my thing, the last time I sat here and I said to the same senator, and you'll remember very well, and we're debating a bill here to borrow, that the government intends to borrow $505 million. I remember that conversation very well. She said, oh, he's misleading the House. The member does not even know the government's budget. I went downstairs, I got the estimate page, I brought the
Senator Fede, Senator Fede, we are not going on this triple rant.
No, we're talking about money.
No, listen, take a seat while I speak.
Yes.
Yes. We are not going down this road again. We've had this discourse. I have ruled on it. I kindly ask you to move on with your presentation. No revisiting of this situation again at this moment.
So, this is a money bill, Madam President, and a lot of my contribution has to do with financing the health sector, because it is in that vein that we stand here today. We are borrowing to finance the health sector. How could I be asked to shut up about the fiscal situation and financing of the health sector?
Senator.
Yes, tell me.
I think you should choose your words carefully. I have not asked you to shut up. And I think you should withdraw that. I have not asked you to shut up. Please withdraw that.
I withdraw the statement?
Yes. And I'm advising you, as I indicated earlier, that discourse that we've had in the past between you and Senator Jean, I ask you not to go there to that discourse and that you move on. Simply.
Thank you, Madam President.
Move on, Senator. Thank you.
And so here we are, having a discussion about financing one of our hospitals, the operational expenses. And of course, I mean, the positions that the opposition will take is not always going to be accepted by the government. They rise without any substantive evidence and ask us to withdraw statements that have been said on the government side, have been said out that the UWP has been borrowing. But today, we're coming to borrow in one go 50 million. And they are well on course, Madam President, to borrow the 505 million that they planned on the outset of the budget, which ends in a few weeks' time on the 31st of March. I remember coming here in one sitting and 100 million US was borrowed, which is amounting to 270 million Eastern Caribbean dollars. And that was the sitting before I was told that they still had some ways to go in the financial year. And so the government would not have reached that 505 million threshold. But the records are coming out soon, and we will see what the government is going to borrow. And so, Madam President, financing the healthcare needs of the country has been undermined significantly over the years by fiscal challenges which governments have faced over the years. Slow economic growth has affected the taxes that has come through within the various financial years. The other problem that we are seeing now, and right in this motion we see a reflection of it, is the fact that the interest rate that is inching up towards 6%. In this very motion, look at the terms carefully, and we see a very, very clear impact on the global inflation problem. And so the analysis must be done to show what the measures that central banks around the world are going to, that they have taken to try to curtail the global inflation problem, what impact that is going to have on government's ability to be able to finance the healthcare sector. That's the big question. And so if commercial banks, if central banks rather, around the world, in an effort to curb the inflation problem, will raise interest rates, what is that going to do to our ability to be able to source monies? It is likely that that is going to make our ability to source money, especially when borrowing, more expensive. Simple economics. And so as that happens, what is the government's strategy to win this problem that we face? These are the big conversations that we need to have. Not the crosstalk that we want to have. You are in government for over 2 years, and you owe it to the people to have a strategy. I heard the senator mention that the minister is seen very often getting donations from entities, whether it's equipment or whatever. But this does not solve the problem. If you ask people in your community what they think of the healthcare sector, regardless of which government is in power, right? And we are here not to criticize what is going on. Why are we here? We are here to have a big conversation on healthcare, because unless we radically change what is happening now, we will not arrive at good quality healthcare for the people of St. Lucia. I saw a report that suggested that St. Lucia needs about 360 million to get not ideal but good quality healthcare. And if I'm not mistaken, they in the last budget, the last one I remember in 2019, it was probably 140 million that is being spent in the health sector. If you have a different number, please share it with the public. But the point is whether you are at 160 million or 140 million, we are about 200 million short in what we need in the healthcare sector to ensure that we can provide good quality healthcare for the people. And so I've got news for you, Madam President, through you. I've got news for the senator that a donation here and there going back to the St. Jude's Bazaar is not going to help us to move the needle drastically, because we need to ensure that we can finance the needs of these people. And whether you want to call it universal health care or whatever name you want to call your program, changing the name of it is not going to help. It has to do with how do we finance what is taking place now. That is the big question. I believe, Madam President, that any government that doesn't address this conversation head on, whether you want to suggest that just by naming it something that you're going to solve healthcare, no, that's not going to solve it. That's not going to prevent our citizens from going in front of a supermarket with a sheet and asking people to help them when their healthcare bill overseas is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the reality. That is what we face now. This cannot be a political conversation anymore. This has to be a real development conversation that looks at the problems within the health sector head on. And my colleague did the most incredible job. And it really is a crying shame that instead of saying my colleague here is right, the senator is right in what he has done in identifying the problems that are afflicting the health sector. He was excoriated. He was asked, where was he? Right? He was asked a whole ton of political questions that have nothing to do with ensuring that we can beat this problem, which is going to affect whether it is UWP or the St. Lucia Labour Party administration that is presiding over the management of the healthcare sector of the country. So unfortunately, I've heard nothing from the government to say to me, to convince people listening that they are in charge of the situation, that they are able to then rectify the problems that are afflicting our citizens in the country, whether it's at St. Jude's, whether it's in our health centers, whether it is improving and expanding the primary health care services, whether it is at the Soufriere Hospital, whether it is having sufficient beds, whether it is having the reagents. Look, I can go and find in the report that your team did mismanagement. I can read out clauses that but I'm not going to do that. This is the report that was passed in the House, this one, okay, that your team did on St. Jude's, and to show you where supplies never made it to the island that you have paid for. But that's not going to solve anything, right? That's not going to solve anything. What's going to solve it is a big conversation to radically turn our health sector on its head. And unfortunately, our health professionals are not impressed with what you're doing right now. And that's why you have a lot of the challenges that are affecting them now. You don't have reagents, you don't have medication, you don't have, the problems are many. And I'm not saying that we didn't have those problems too. I'm not saying that we didn't have those problems too. But there is a systemic problem, there is a chronic problem that's affecting the healthcare sector that has plagued many ministers of health for decades. That's the point. That's the point. That's what we're trying to say. So now, how do we address it? How do we beat this situation on its head? How do we overcome it? You can tell us all of our faults. We're not perfect. Okay? But you are in government for 2 years, almost 2 years. You're going to be there for July is, what month are we in? March? Right? 19 months or whatever. But you're there for a long time now. You got to take responsibility and stop distracting the country from playing politics. And so, Madam President, the position that the government has taken on borrowing, and I say this unashamedly, that they have excoriated us while in government for borrowing. And the position that they have taken on borrowing, I think it has now tied their hands as it relates to, it is now coming back to haunt them, if I can use that phrase. Because now they need to come to the house to borrow to fix a necessary problem, and we support it. We support the idea. But what we cannot appreciate is the duplicity and the double standards with which they have conducted their affairs. You cannot have one position in opposition and then adopt another position in government. And that's what we're saying, is that with problems like these, we need to ensure that we have the adequate amount of financing to be able to do that. There can be no price on the people's health. And so if you have to borrow, borrow. That's fine. Nobody is gonna criticize you for that. But what we do criticize is the fact that you have assumed an irresponsible and reckless position while in opposition, and now you want to change your mouth to say you always meant irresponsible. You are going to borrow. In this year, you plan to borrow the most that a government has ever borrowed outside a pandemic or an economic disaster. That's your record. The most, 505 million is what you intend to borrow. Right? And if you have a policy that you feel that you need to, in this fiscal year, get some things
Senator
done,
Jean.
I have no problems with that.
Madam President, on a point of order, the member continues to mislead the House. The member indicated that this government intends to borrow 505 million Eastern Caribbean dollars, which is the highest borrowings by a government. Madam President,
Outside a pandemic or an economic crisis?
whether it's outside or inside of a pandemic, Madam President, the records reveal from the estimates of expenditure that in the year 2020 to 2021, the government of St. Lucia borrowed $601,281,475. Whether it is inside or outside of a pandemic, Madam President, the records reveal, Madam President, that there was more.
I can't believe that kind of psychosis.
Senators, let's just move on.
And that doesn't include BFCs.
Thank you very much.
Senator Daniel.
Madam President, I rise just to seek some elucidation because I am hearing Senator Fede qualifying his claims of heavy borrowing. He was careful to say outside a pandemic. Maybe I missed this, but has an end been declared authoritatively and formally to the pandemic? Because I am under the impression that as per our guidance from WHO, from CAFA, and from others, that the world is still considered to be in a pandemic and no official end to the pandemic has been declared. So can you clarify that for me as to whether the government of St. Lucia is still not subject to and influenced by a pandemic?
Thank you very much.
Senator Fede, your clarification, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank my learned friend for the question, and I want to say to him that obviously in the year 2020, 2021, the year that the Senator quoted, you would agree with me that we were in the middle and in the depth of the pandemic. I want to say to you that when we look
You speak through the chair. You speak through the chair.
yeah, Madam President, through you, I want to say to the member that as we look at the public health indicators and the way that the public health officials have addressed this issue, the protocols are lax, travel restrictions are there. We're not coming to Parliament with a mask anymore. The number of COVID cases that we would have had in the year 2020 cannot compare. It's chalk and cheese.
Senator Fede?
Yes, ma'am.
I beg to guide you accordingly. Yes, masks are not being worn, etc., but I concur that it has not been officially announced that the pandemic is over. And so I think you should correct your statement for the record.
So, Madam President, if I can just give a bit more elucidation. So, Senator Daniel spoke about the world. The only country of late that have gone through, have a COVID problem is China. St. Lucia hasn't had a major outbreak in COVID. Where did you have that? And so therefore, I understand the member's question, but let's qualify this. We're talking about the fiscal position of St. Lucia.
We're talking about
the
Senator.
Yes.
We're talking about the statement that you made that the COVID-19 period is over. And I am saying to you, just like the senator indicated, as I last read from PAHO, from the director and WHO, that COVID is not over. I received that information myself. So I'm saying to you, it's time to correct your statement. It is not over, Senator. Please correct that for the record.
Yeah. Madam President, would you agree with me if I say to you that the height of the pandemic has certainly subsided? Would you agree with that?
Are you correcting your statement?
No. And do you also agree, Madam President?
Did you say no?
No, I mean, we're having a chat, isn't it?
No, I'm not having a chat. I indicated to you to correct the information for the record. This is going to be recorded.
No problem,
okay?
Madam
So you do not want this to go down as your statement. So correct it, please.
And so, Madam President, I'll correct it this way. While the world is still on COVID watch, right? It is clear that we are no longer in the height of the pandemic. And so, Madam President, we cannot compare when a government's economy is shut down, when the borders are closed, and the impact that would have on a tourism-dependent economy. We cannot compare when the cost of healthcare during the height of a pandemic and the impact that would have on government's own response and the money is required to what is happening now. The economy is open, the borders are open in a tourism-dependent, driven economy, and so there can be no comparison to then and now, is the point that we're making. And so if you are, I mean, look, the country is still, for example, responding to some of the infrastructure requirements of Hurricane Tomas.
Senator,
they're still building some Hurricane Tomas. Yeah?
You have 15 minutes to complete your presentation.
Thank you. Am I going to say that the year when Hurricane Tomas happened, that I can compare what level of financial resources that the government had to employ then versus now to the back end of the response? Obviously, as you move away from the center of the disaster response, you're going to have less to spend. And I think this is the point, Senator, that we're trying to establish through you, Madam President, if I can just clarify to the Senator. But moving on, the 3.5 that we're coming here to borrow, I agree with my colleague, it's a drop in the bucket. And I wonder why, as we hear all of these problems that are affecting St. Jude's, why this is the amount that is being sought here for approval, whether is it that the St. Jude's management team would have indicated that this is okay, or were they requesting more? Is there a shortfall in terms of what they requested versus? That is an important question, because I certainly would have liked to have known whether they were requesting 10 million and they only got 3 because we are dealing with a particular financial problem in the country. That is an important question, and I wish that the government side could answer that maybe in the rebuttal by the leader of government business. But this problem, I do understand the issues that budgetary constraints can often have, but it requires us to have a serious revenue conversation pertaining to how do we then better finance not just healthcare, but how do we then better finance the operations of government? How do we kickstart this economy so that the economic growth that we can derive from this strategy that the government would have, or if there is a strategy, we would certainly like to know on this end, to improve the revenue, grow the revenue, so that we can address the situation. The issues of where it was mentioned that better collections were necessary by the senator. And yes, that will help, better accountability. But again, I would respond to that by saying how I started the big financial conversation, the big revenue conversation, the big economic conversation, so that we can address this situation that is afflicting the thing. So I do note here, Madam President, that almost 54 million is being sought here today over various motions. That's quite a bit of money. And I look forward to debating the other borrowings that are going to be done on this bill. Other motions rather. So not the prettiest of positions to be in, but I want to say that we, in spirit, support the borrowing to finance the operations. We want to let the health sector employees know that we stand with them. We are here to give whatever moral support that we can. We're not the government, but we're going to give whatever moral support that we can to make sure that the tools that they get, that they require, that we will raise our voices when necessary so that the government can do right by them and support them. So I will end here, Madam President, by saying that in spirit we support this, but we have concerns about the bigger picture. We have concerns about the government side's own ability to get on top of this situation. We have concerns about how duplicitous this government have been on borrowing, and I think that today exposes that duplicity and exposes that double standard, where governments have got to be very careful of positions that they may take in opposition, because one day you're going to have to govern. One day you're going to have to govern with the reality, and one day you will have to deal with important matters like this. I thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Paulius.
Okay, we'll catch up.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, one qualitative indicator of a nation's wealth is the health of the people. It's the quality of health of the people, as well as the quality of health care provided to the citizens of a nation. Madam President, we recognize the innumerable sacrifices made by all the healthcare professionals at the St. Jude Hospital, doctors, nurses, and all those who play a critical role in helping our citizens recover from whatever ailment, whatever illness, that challenges them. So we recognize that and we appreciate what they've been doing given the circumstances under which they operate, under which they work. Madam President, I want to lend my support to this motion to allow the Minister of Finance to borrow in the sum of 3.5 million EC dollars for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements at the St. Jude Hospital. We welcome, Madam President, any intervention, any measure that is going to bring some form of relief to our people. We welcome it. However, we need to begin to look at the bigger picture. And as we look at the bigger picture, Madam President, we want to begin to look forward, and we have to look forward to the day when this administration will make it possible for St. Lucians to enjoy quality health care, facilities that go beyond the quick fixes to those that meet international standards, international health standards, and to those that can help to reduce the outrageous medical expenses that our people have to incur, particularly when they have to be flown over to Martinique for medical treatment. And at this point, let me extend my wishes to the member for Castries Southeast, is it? I want to wish him a speedy recovery. Today, it is him. Tomorrow, it might be me or someone else. And so, whatever the former administration did, or whatever they attempted to do to improve the quality of health care in St. Lucia, would help to alleviate, would help to reduce the amount that we have to spend to receive medical treatment in other countries, in our neighboring islands in Martinique. And Madam President, you would agree that not everyone can afford it. Very few of us can afford it. Very few of us can present the 10,000 euros or the 12,000 or 20,000 euros in order to receive that kind of medical treatment. What do we do for those who can't afford? What do we do for the minority? How can we assist them? How can we help them access better quality health care? This is what the former UWP administration sought to do. Madam President, I won't be too long on this matter, but just to reiterate my support, our support for the motion, and also to remind us, to remind St. Lucians, to remind this government, to remind all of us that quality health care leads to a healthier nation. It leads to the longevity of our people, and most importantly, to a wealthier nation. That's important. And we cannot play games with the health of our people. Whether it is this government or the former, any government, we cannot play games or political games with the health of our people. Can we really wait until it hits us, a family member, our husbands, our wives, our children, to begin to act? No. So whether I am here on this side of this chamber today or on the other side, I will maintain my position. I will maintain my position. We need to give credit where credit is due, and we need to ensure that our people, our sons and daughters of Fair Helen, receive the best quality health care that is there. Madam President, to conclude, I hope, and we all hope, that the monies to be borrowed will be used to augment the healthcare system in our country, and will be used also to make healthcare more affordable for all St. Lucians. I thank you.
Senator Daniel.
Madam President, thank you so very much for recognizing me, and thank you for the welcome that you give, as well as the fellow senators. As you know, I'm only here for one day. Barely enough time to get my feet wet. I had decided or thought that I would come in and listen and learn and try to say very little, if anything at all, because of my lack of familiarity with the processes and procedures here, and said, you know, rather than come and try to jump in too early, it might be good to hold back a little. But then I figured, why be here at all if I'm not going to add or contribute anything whatsoever? Let me say I am very impressed and very pleased with the quality, the tone, and I dare say the goodwill of the debate here, especially on this resolution to borrow $3.5 million for the purpose of working capital in respect of St. Jude Hospital. Madam President, one of the tragedies of when you have to relocate and when you have to move from facilities that are in a bad state of disrepair and dereliction and deterioration and dilapidation is that even while you have to be undertaking the humongous expenditures of the new facility, its construction, its equipping, its outfitting, its staffing, and all the things that go with it, you have to be spending a lot of money on the very one that you know you have to leave. And sometimes even more so, because it is in a dilapidated condition, money that you wish that you would have liked, ideally, to repurpose, to redirect to the new facility, you still have. It's the reality. You have to be spending it, especially on one that was not designed for that purpose, one that has had the ravages of weather, of time, of rust, of every sort. And I think this is the dilemma of the whole St. Jude Hospital matter, that you have to be expensive of millions of dollars on a new facility, while at the same time recognizing it is what it is. You have to stay and deal with the one that is. Now I have to tell you, I'm a little bit surprised that a resolution as simple and straightforward as this has spawned the depth of discussion that it has wrought. I thought it was a straightforward matter that, it's a hospital, it has need of working capital, it has need, for expenditures, it has needs for procurement, for acquisition, for supplying, the routine things that you find with any institution, but more so with a hospital. So, I am thinking to myself, why is there the difficulty in understanding that this needs to be done? Especially I'm hearing concerns as to whether the money will be spent for the purpose for which it is intended, as to whether the money will be spent properly, as to whether it will deal with this and with that. I was under the impression, and please, any other of my colleague senators who want to educate me a little bit, because I am the least of the apostles there, the least educated, are there not already in place a sufficient framework of public sector financial accountability in terms of the Finance Management Act, in terms of whatever it is that applies in that case, that we can know that when allocations are made, especially one which involves the Parliament of St. Lucia, which means automatically it becomes a charge on the state. It becomes something that is the business of the state. It becomes something that may well, if not now, but later, if not directly or indirectly, involve the consolidated fund of the state. That there will not be sufficient monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and reports and so on to say, hey, we have guaranteed this money for you. If you default on it, ultimately it is going to be a liability and a charge on the central government. Because while we may be dealing with a board, a statutory body, whatever we call it, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the central government. There is a minister who would have appointed people to that board. They would be answerable ultimately to him. So I do not know what is the panic about the probity with which the money that is being guaranteed is going to be spent, how it will be spent. To me, it has to be of necessity spent in accordance with established public sector financial accountability procedures, laws, regulations, whatever that you have it. Well taken. Well taken. But then I have to ask myself, is maybe that uneasiness on the basis of things that have happened in the past? I mean, when you have the absolutely loose way in which vaccines were procured or attempted to be procured, that money is just being put in the hands of an agent or an intermediary who is not in any way connected with the public financial procurements or disbursement systems of the state, who has no track record or connection to WHO or PAHO or CAFA, who are all there to help us and have helped other countries in the region to get the vaccines. You just put it in the hands of that person to get vaccines for us. I don't know if we ever got any vaccines. I heard we got some of the money back. And I suspect the quantity that is still outstanding to us may well be roughly equal to what this resolution is seeking to provide. So perhaps there is an uneasiness about it. I was also surprised, Madam President, to find that there seems to be a misunderstanding of an authorization of a minister to borrow money and the actual borrowing. There seems to be a misunderstanding of when we have a budget, which to my knowledge, we not recall the estimates of revenue and expenditure, which in effect outline plans for how you intend to spend money, where you intend to spend it, and how you intend to raise or to get that money. Whether you're going to get it by grants, by loans, by taxes, by whatever it is, the combination of the whole gamut of them, that you're making a statement of intent. That an authorization to borrow does not represent the actual borrowing. Just like the estimates do not mean actual expenditure that is entered into. And so, I mean, I'm just wondering, you authorize to borrow, does that mean the borrowing will ever take place? So when you begin to already reckon an authorization to borrow, or estimates as if they are already debt, as if they are already things that are contracted and entered into, I don't know. I would like to consider maybe I am the ignorant one in all of this, and I do not understand it. So I hope that those things can be clarified. But I believe some of the questions that are raised, they are legitimate questions. They are the business of an opposition to hold the government accountable, even sometimes on points that may seem irrelevant, as we say, to make sure that you remain faithful and that you remain, have a certain fidelity towards proper and best practices, but it would be good if we had seen those best practices adhered to at other times. There is no telling, for example, I hear opposition members very often referring to the government, and the government this and the government that. I am hoping that going forward that all legislators, and this is someone who just passing through, that they will develop that integrated sense of oneness when it comes to government. We here, including yours truly, who's only here for today, must understand that in the tripod of governance that is seen by our constitution, the executive, aka the cabinet, extended the public service. The legislature, which is 2 houses of our bicameral parliament, and the judiciary, the courts, the judges, the magistrates, etc., that they all are parts of government. And so they are a part of the government as well. And they have to make sure that when they come to this house and debate things, that they have in their minds that we are part of the apparatus as well. The eyes do not always have it and need not always have it, because we have committee stages where things are discussed, amendments are made, adjustments are made, changes are put before they are brought before the people of St. Lucia. So that is my little contribution in terms of asking about the monitoring and how the money is going to spend, if it is well spent. If things are spent in accordance with the law, whatever the mechanisms of accountability, then there should be absolutely no issue or no problem with that. Excuse me? The financing plan. Doesn't this adequately say that this is a resolution to authorize the Minister of Finance, to guarantee? Well, you see, that's the problem, I believe. Madam President, yes, thank you very much. I was about,
Trying to do that.
Yeah. But this is the point. Too much extraneous references that go beyond and outside what we are dealing with. We're dealing with a resolution. Let us deal with that. We're not talking about an overall fiscal management plan. That is outlined usually in the budget, the national budget. For us to be going into a plan, that is where the different heads of a budget of how you're going to spend money, the various heads on the way it will be spent, how you're going to get that money, that is where the plan is there. But at the same time, for the immediacy, we need to talk about the needs of St. Jude Hospital to finance its day-to-day operations, providing them the facilities of an overdraft and so on that they have to do, so that they don't have to be running cap in hand to the Accountant General and the Minister of Finance every day. That they will be doing things according to corporate governance, in accordance with best practices, and these are the things that we want them to be able to do. I am certain that whatever board they has representation from the central government, whether from the Ministry of Health, whether from the Ministry of Finance, so that if the board has any tendency to use the overdraft and the facilities and the guarantee in a manner that is not in keeping with the overarching plans of and for St. Jude Hospital, that the government takes responsibility for, that they can be reined in. Finally, Madam President, I want to say, we have to be very careful when we come and pontificate and moralize about things which we were in a position to influence and to correct. You see, this whole matter about awarding contracts, I think the issue that the senators brought is a very good one. It has to do with best practices and best value for money. How much best value for money was it in the culture of direct awards that we saw in this country? How much value for money can you assure yourself or guarantee yourself when you are not engaging in any process of tendering or competitive bidding? It's just direct award after direct award after direct award, and you're not talking about for a few million or even 5 million or whatever. Direct award for how many tens of millions of dollars repetitively? And it seems like those direct awards were going to only one beneficiary or recipient almost all the time. And these are the things we need to tell ourselves when we circumvent and bypass the proven best practice and recommended means of fiscal management and accountability, which involves tendering and competitive bidding. And we did that so continuously and repetitively for so many years. Whether we have robbed ourselves of the credibility, of the legitimacy, of the moral authority to talk about best practice. But despite this, it serves no purpose to continue reproaching and reminding others of their errors, although those who do not remember the past may well doom themselves to repeat it. But in this new dispensation, we must all agree that if we are going to speak about best practice, there has to be an acknowledgement of the history of bad practices, of malpractices that probably have landed us in a financial squeeze where maybe now we need to borrow more than we perhaps otherwise might. I did say finally, but a little note after the finally. I have never, and I'm not claiming to be one who has paid attention the most, ever heard this government, especially the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, ever say that they have no intention to borrow or that they will not borrow. I remember him saying that up to this point when I was listening, we have not yet borrowed. I have never heard them suggest that borrowing is anathema, that borrowing is evil, that borrowing is a no-no. That would be absolute madness on its own stead to suggest that the government will not borrow and it does not have to borrow. What we need to make is the differentiation between getting parliamentary authorization to borrow, whether for the annual fiscal budget or whether for these resolutions, whether we should be speaking of them as if they are already fait accompli. We may have something that changes. We may have better tourism. We may have better hotel occupancy tax. We may have better collections. We may have unexpected aid that makes even the intent to borrow, as stated in a document, such as the appropriation bill, which in fact all it does, it is that it authorizes the raising of revenue and the expenditure of funds, but it does not necessarily say that they will be contracted in fact. That is why you end up having fiscal surpluses as well as you might end up having fiscal deficits at the end of the day. So we need to make those differentiations and stop making it sound like an authorization to borrow or an appropriation bill which gives the legal authority to raise money and to spend money, that it means it has already and actually been done. I am a newcomer. I'm just passing through. I don't want to pretend like I come here and I have any capacity to educate people, but just some observations that I thought I should share in acknowledgement and in gratitude for this honor and privilege that I have been granted for this day. Madam President, thank you.
Senator Jean.
Thank you, Madam President. Your lights.
Oh, sorry.
Madam President, I did not intend to speak on this bill, on this resolution, because when I saw this resolution to borrow 3.5 million EC dollars, or to guarantee the borrowing of 3.5 million EC dollars to the St. Jude Hospital, like was said by a member of this chamber, I saw it as a drop in the ocean. Because, Madam President, we all know that health care is expensive. And quality health care, Madam President, requires tremendous resources. Madam President, $3.5 million to meet working capital or operational costs, or perhaps we could term it as short-term obligations for a hospital is really a minute amount to be injected into such an institution. Madam President, our citizens must realize that when they seek services from our public health institutions, that they are really not paying the true cost of health care. Because, Madam President, when we go to some private hospitals, and I remember once going to a private hospital, and after getting my bill, an itemized bill, where it showed the cost of every little piece of gauze that was used, the little hairnet that they gave me, the gloves that were used by the medical staff, every single item that was used in the process of providing health services to me at that time was itemized. And I remember speaking to someone who worked in the public health system and was talking about the amount and the itemized bill, and she said to me, this is really the true cost of health care. So when our citizens go to our health institutions and have to pay $25 for health services and leave in a better condition, we know that they are not paying the true cost for health services. Some of us who have had to travel overseas and to get health services or health care, we see there too the true cost of health care, some of it mounting to the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Madam President, we know that the St. Jude Hospital is housed in the George Odlum Stadium, and they are dealing with aging infrastructure. They have to deal with maintenance of that infrastructure, compounded by the fact of escalating crime in that particular locality. And so this further exacerbates the pressure of the hospital staff at the St. Jude Hospital. I hear and I want to add my voice to the cry for assistance to the staff of the St. Jude Hospital. But Madam President, will the staff of the hospital forget the neglect that they suffered over the last 5+ years? When there was an opportunity, Madam President, for there to have been the completion of an existing structure to transfer the hospital to its original site. Instead, there was a box built, Madam President, costing $118 million EC dollars. And now we're hearing that box has no roof. The box is what it is. A wet vig, Madam President. There are no facilities, no services, no utilities in that box. And we spent an entire 5-year governmental term.
More than 5 years.
More than 5 years. I call it 5+ overtime.
That's right.
5+ overtime. And the staff of the St. Jude Hospital still have to endure substandard facilities in the George Odlum Stadium. So now we're crying for the staff. But Madam President, history is extremely important. I'm hearing like they don't want to hear about history. But if we do not know our history, we will not know where we're going, Madam President. And so it is important for us to highlight to the people of St. Lucia the poor planning and management of our country that we faced over the period 2016 to 2021. It is important to keep it etched in the minds of our people that we had a government that did not have their interests at heart. And so for the St. Jude Hospital, imagine, Madam President, we came here a few months ago to amend the St. Jude Act to cause the Minister of Finance to be able to guarantee borrowing of St. Jude. We had to do that first. To an ailing organization, and now to allow them to borrow, but to be guaranteed by the government of St. Lucia. Just $3.5 million. We want to talk about monitoring systems. Yes, of course we need monitoring systems, but didn't we need monitoring systems when we were given, what they call them, an entertainer? $7 million for vaccines, when we had a COVAX system that provided us with free vaccines. We gave is it an entertainer or cement provider? An entertainer stroke cement provider stroke whatever. $7 million, a full advance payment, when we know in the public service that you have a limit for you to give a supplier an advance payment before you can receive the supplies. In this case, we gave the full $7 million. Madam President, our people need to stage a protest to get our vaccine money back. So when they try coming here and have people, over the last 2 weeks, 12 people each time coming here, we need to have a larger crowd to demand our money back. Because if the government of St. Lucia had that $7 million vaccine money, we would not have to come and borrow $3.5 million for the St. Jude Hospital. Madam President, we've heard of squandermania. We've heard of so much squandering, Madam President. And the institutions that need the money most are the ones languishing. I agree with the member on the other side that we do not know when it will be our turn to have to seek services from these hospitals. And so we need to have the hospitals well serviced, well resourced. But Madam President, there is something called opportunity cost. The money that we've taken and spent on other things is reducing the amount that we could spend on the important things like health care. Madam President, when we took $32 million and we gave to a man to put plastic grass, Madam President, grass that has the potential to cause cancer, to get sports people injured and sick. They gave them $32 million. Opportunity cost, Madam President. $32 million to range development. Madam President, I couldn't believe when I heard some time ago, because I've been listening to this Daha Mall, this whole thing about Daha Mall, and it was so confusing to me because when I do math, I believe that math produces logic, it tells you, right? A structure was purchased by the government of St. Lucia for $55 million. Do the math, For $55 million per purchased by the government of St. Lucia, that very same structure was sold for $13 million. What's the loss on that? This is opportunity cost, Madam President. Had we gotten these monies, we would have better health facilities in our country. We spent 3 years, Madam President, doing nothing on the St. Jude project. Then a box shape. So we're hearing work is being done on St. Jude and so on. And if we don't complete St. Jude, then we have no right for you to vote for us. We thought the people of St. Lucia were not listening, but Madam President, we were listening attentively. So that was the measurement, that was the yardstick. No St. Jude, no vote.
That's right.
But Madam President, $118 million. Madam President, I want to ask every member in here, any of us have $1 million on our account? Est-ce nous savons ça? $1 million. C'est Adidas live back no. How many of us have $1 million on our bank account, Madam President? Maybe some of them, I don't know. But Madam President, I am not sure that in my lifetime I will ever see $1 million in my possession. And you have people taking the taxpayers' money, taking the money from the vendors by the market, taking the money from the poor lady selling by the school, the people who sit down making ice lolly and tamarind balls to sell. These people's money, Madam President, is what is in that $118 million box that has now put us years behind to complete the hospital. But for the wisdom of this administration and this Prime Minister, the people of St. Lucia will see a St. Jude Hospital fully furnished and providing quality services very, very soon. With international standards, because the box didn't meet international standards. The box, Madam President, the cladding, we've seen, the research shows that the cladding is not even the best for a hospital. Mais c'est gouvernement ça nous tenir là, bel coulé, solide, bel bail, renderings, boxed, bel coulé. It was painted yellow too. Oui, by jaune, just pour black, vegle moon. Et qu'elle dit David. Huh? Madam President, we need to have more confidence in our people, that our people know. Le jaune, papa pour be. Madam President, I'm hearing about an X-ray machine and reagents and so on, and I've just been guided that there is an X-ray, the portable X-ray machine at St. Jude Hospital is fully functional at this time. Pavinicia Mati Baimon, Madam President. Pavinicia Mati. Because the people who are getting the services from the south know that the X-ray machine is functional. Let me go on, Madam President. The floor-mounted machine needs servicing, and a meeting was held with General Electric, which is the equipment supplier. A meeting was held yesterday to get the parts for servicing the mounted X-ray machine soon. So there is X-ray service. So personne pas ni pour aller pièce l'autre côté pour un X-ray. Huh? Nous can venir ici à carrer les boys, moun, comme si you know we have the people, we were so concerned about the people. So yeah. There is no shortage of critical pharmaceuticals at this time. While from time to time we do have shortages of some pharmaceuticals due to supply chain issues.
It's normal.
Whether we're in the middle of COVID or we're in the beginning or in the end, we still have issues. Supply chain issues, war in Ukraine, we have COVID still. So I don't know why we want to put it in context, pre-COVID, middle COVID, past COVID, post-COVID. So do not come here and bring, kind of, shall we say, kind of pity on the people of the South and, make people believe that there are no services down there. And even though there are no services down there, Brother President, like I said before, the opportunity cost of doing all what squandering money and everything is what is now on the plight of the St. Jude Hospital. We know all of the woes of St. Jude. We knew everything that was happening with St. Jude. Yet still, Madam President, what was the priority of the former government? Pour cheval, pas ça, yote café?
Gallop.
Huh?
Gallop.
The horse race facility was given priority over the St. Jude Hospital. We must never forget that. They want us to forget history. We must never forget history. The people of St. Lucia need to demand that they are put before horses. Putting people first. Pas mettre cheval avant. Cheval te venir en plein air condition. First class you te venir, Madam President. First class. And then people come in there, they have their little hat on their head and the fascinator, a little dainty, what they say, the St. Lucia Derby. While people in St. Jude Hospital, some of them had to be seated in wheelchairs while they're waiting for service because they are not adequate beds.
That's true.
We didn't know that?
That's very true.
Madam President, we had a VAT rate of 15%. You coupe style, you coupe. They take out 2.5% and say, because their promise that the people voted for was for the complete elimination of VAT. The complete elimination of VAT. You take 2.5%.
That's 52 million.
50 how many?
52
$52 million
million.
a year. Opportunity cost, Madam President.
And now he's saying tax.
Now we're talking about a national health insurance. And it would have been good for us to utilize that 2.5% or $52 million as a national health insurance without putting additional burden on the people of St. Lucia. But when you see people have their own economics, I don't know what kind of economics it is. When you have a degree and you cannot decipher whether it's economics, accounting, management, business, science, it mixes like a bouillon. You wonder what kind of economics is this? You reduce VAT. The people of St. Lucia has not seen the effect of the reduction in VAT. The only place we've seen the effect is in the public purse. Because $52 million, you have less revenue going to the government of St. Lucia, to the consolidated fund. Right? But at the supermarkets and where we have to go to get service, we're not seeing the effect. So these are the things, this is what the National Health Insurance, Madam President, we're talking about the bigger picture. We want to see the bigger picture, but before we look at the bigger picture, you know we must touch the trees before we see the forest, right? So the bigger picture must start with a single step, which is give the St. Jude Hospital a guarantee to raise its financing. That's the step. Bigger picture not coming from the sky. You know, when they wanted, I remember seeing a rendering of the Pearl of the Caribbean. The Pearl of the Caribbean. That's the bigger picture. The Pearl of the Caribbean. Huh? Up to a jour aujourd'hui, la panillon. What's the half of it? What's the pearls? I have the pearls. Right, the pearls. Right? You don't see pebbles. You don't see stones. You don't see... Huh? So that's the bigger picture. But it has to start with a single step. Don't come with your big grandiose things. Bigger picture starts with every little thing that we add to it. So we need the implementation of the National Health Insurance needs to be hastened to provide the resources for health care and quality service to the people of St. Lucia. Madam President, lastly, I just want to note that ever since I've been in this August chamber, from October of last year, almost every resolution that has come to us has been for health care. And that shows the focus of the government and people of St. Lucia, of the government of St. Lucia in particular. And we have seen out of that the slogan of putting people first is not just a slogan, but it is really put into action by these resolutions that will cause an improvement in our healthcare system in St. Lucia. So, when we hear it was not COVID because you're not in COVID and you're not, the point is some of the things that could have been done in the past that were neglected must be done by this government, and this government has taken the bold step to go into the borrowing, give the resources to the various hospitals so that our people can get better services, better health care, and to take the proverb that was used by my friend Senator Paulius, health is wealth. A healthy nation is a wealthy nation. If we leave the health of our country to just languish, none of us in St. Lucia will be wealthy. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to respond briefly to the contributions made by my colleagues. And as fate would have it, I am about to rebut for yet another occasion that my colleague leader of opposition business is absent. I look forward to the day when that will not happen, but I do thank his colleague for being here, understanding that Senator Stanislas had good reason not to be. But with the leader of government opposition business, Madam President, same old, same old. Madam President, the Prime Minister has been very, very clear about the priorities or the focus of this government as far as what we believe must be given high and deliberate priority, at least for now. And I think Senator Jean mentioned it towards the end of her presentation, that there are two issues that the Prime Minister has been very clear about in terms of his policy focus and direction that we have in the last 18 months and a little bit more decided that must be priority. And even in the next budget, soon, that will soon be delivered, we will see that focus being again brought to the fore. And that is, Madam President, one, healthcare, and two, national security. And as consistent as we have been, and as correct as the Senator was, most of the time we have come to this chamber to seek approval for borrowing. Healthcare has been one of the most, well, the main reason, really. And so that is very consistent. And as far as national security, before this motion, our business this morning was to attend to that. We have come before also to make amendments to the Firearms Act and other related legislation to beef up on our national security, because we recognize what the needs of our country is at this time. So it's by no accident, Madam President, that this motion and two others to come are focusing on healthcare. Madam President, I just want to briefly touch on a few issues that were raised. One, by the first member of the opposition who spoke and has left. I have to give him some credit because he attempted in the beginning to have a posture of empathy. But you know, the opposition has a way, they can't help themselves. Even when they try their very best to say that they support a bill or a motion, that malady, that tendency to find a low blow always comes in. So I listened, and the posture of empathy was there, speaking about the issues that he would like to see addressed, which in the main were correct at St. Jude Hospital. At some point, I wanted to ask him whether he had a short stint as a staff member, because he seemed to have intimate knowledge of some of the needs of the hospital. I know he's from Soufriere, but clearly he had intimate knowledge. And I had no issues with that. Reagents, apparatus for IV, pharmaceuticals, bed sheets, pillows, cafeteria supplies. He even made a suggestion about twinning with the Taiwanese, which is all good. No problems with that. But Madam President, I just want to, for the benefit of the opposition, ask the member that with all of those intimate details that he has of St. Jude, that of course have been there for a while, I would have expected him to have raised those issues when he sat in a cabinet. He's now in opposition. He sat in a cabinet where every Monday decisions were being made about what we were going to spend on, decisions we were going to decide on what we need to do as priority. And I would like to find out where, well, my colleague said where was he, but where was his voice then? Albeit, okay, maybe he has come to the realization, you know, elections have consequences, and that's one of the consequences of elections. Sometimes it allows us to see things that we didn't want to see before. So the reality is with him now, and I hope that it's a rude awakening for all of his other colleagues. Madam President, we then heard from the leader of opposition business. And while I asked the question of the previous Senator Stanislas, I was hoping that the leader of government business would have taken a cue from his approach. I must say Senator Polius had a completely different approach, and I'll get to her shortly because clearly she didn't follow the cue of her leader, at least not this time. Of her leader in the Senate, not this time, but I just hold my breath on that one. Madam President, the leader of opposition business, in his usual way, went about raising some issues. And many of them are issues that are not new. So I don't want to go into the details of all of them in the interest of time. But these issues he was raising, Madam President, is exactly why we are here today. That is why we came here today, to address the issues that he had raised. So I don't know why he was just, going on and on about the issues. We have recognized these issues are there, and so we are here today to authorize for the money to be available to address those very issues. But then he made a few other points that I have to address. And one of them, Madam President, is that he was making a suggestion to this government to, in his whole thrust about taking a whole comprehensive plan for health that he all of a sudden has, that we should consider tax revenue. In other words, imposing a tax.
Yes.
Now, governments will, from time to time, have to introduce taxes. I am not going to take the liberty to say that the Labour Party government shall never impose or introduce a tax. That's dangerous grounds. Just like the Prime Minister never said that he will not borrow. But when the opposition, in suggesting alternatives and ideas, tells, especially this opposition, tells the government that they should consider a tax, the first thing I thought about was, I just wanted to leave him. I didn't say anything, but I suspect this opposition is looking for content for the press conference. Yeah. And that would be a juicy topic, that the Labour Party is imposing taxes on the people of St. Lucia. That is what they did when we had VAT. VAT is 15% and we'll cut VAT. It's too many taxes. The country is overburdened with taxes. That's what their leader used and won the elections in 2016. Too many taxes and he's going to cut VAT. But today, they're asking us to put a tax so that they can go and have press conferences and share it. But, Madam President, we're not dancing to the tune of the opposition. This government came in with a mandate and will stick to it. Madam President, he also tried to make an issue out of the borrowing, and borrowing, and we said we wouldn't borrow, and he went back tried to go back to the 508 million, and I think Senator Jean had to stand up and challenge it. But, Madam President, I think that we must remind the opposition that many of the times we came here, and we are going to come back here, a lot of what he's telling us that we are borrowing for, as we will see in the next motion, is to pay for the debt that his government and in his cabinet has incurred on us. And when I say on us, not on the government, but on the people of this country. And we have obligations to the creditors we have to pay back. Now, if they had borrowed these monies and had spent these monies in a prudent way, for us to have come here today and say, well, they used it for that, and we now don't have to pay. But, Madam President, these monies were virtually squandered, and now we have to come here to borrow money to pay those debts. But they know what they did. So they did what they did, and every time we come to try and pay for what they did, they tell us, you borrowed. Vous savez bien nous tenir pour prêter. Parce que ou qui ba nous dette pour prêter. Madam President, I want to be brief, so I need to wrap up. Interest rates. When you're fishing for an argument all over the place, interest rates. You notice that the interest rates on this loan is almost 6%. Really? I remember the former Prime Minister, his leader, unopposed. There's an unopposed thing going on these days, but I don't want to go there. His unopposed leader, coming to the Parliament. I was sitting on this side and telling the Parliament that we're proud to be able to borrow. That's the first time in the history of any Parliament I've heard any Prime Minister saying to his people, we are proud to be able to borrow. How could you be proud to be able to borrow? Nobody wants to have to go and borrow. If you can do without borrowing, all the better. You borrow when you need to. But this Prime Minister was proud to be able to borrow because the interest rates were concessionary, especially when there was the COVID situation. Millions being borrowed. That's the Madi Puete that we were talking about. And when they couldn't deal with the Madi Puete, they were justifying, we are proud to be able to borrow because the interest rates were so good. But today, he's concerned about interest rates. The difference an election makes. And I have told him he should not say Mr. Speaker. Get used to Mr. or Madam President. Because the people of Ansari Canaries, they've done what they had to do. Madam President, again, when the whole argument had no focus, the leader of government business, then opposition business, I'm sorry, then tried to bring in the issue of borrowing inside the pandemic and outside the pandemic, and then in the middle of the pandemic, and it was the pandemic and the pandemic and the pandemic. So the argument has shifted from all different angles, right? First, introduce a tax, then you need to watch the interest rate, and then borrow how much you're borrowing inside and outside and around and between the pandemic. Well, the Senator Daniel, being very alert, of course, really, dealt him a good blow when he stood on a point of order to make a very, very valid point that no one has declared that there is no more pandemic, because in fact, in my explanation of the motion, I did indicate that COVID is still with us, and all of us have agreed. So this thing about outside pandemic and inside pandemic, Madam President, was just another way of trying to derail the argument that we are only here to authorize money for St. Jude Hospital operations. And so the opposition again has failed to convince anyone that they have any valid argument against what was there. At least the leader of opposition business was not able to do that. Now, it took us to the Senator Polius, who I think today had a very interesting approach. So far, very different, and I cross my fingers because we have more motions to come. So I don't want to get too comfortable, but I must say that her contribution focused on making it very clear that when there is need to borrow for a cause of health, that she thinks it is justified. I picked up the essence of that, and I thought that argument was balanced and fair.
Yes.
Madam President, however, and that's, I was saying when she started, I know there was a point when something is going, I know it was coming. However, I didn't miss the point that she made about her then government's previous borrowing was, and I noted it, really allowing to reduce the amount of borrowing we had to do now. It's a logical argument. Yeah, she can paraphrase, and medical expenses, very good. Thank you, Senator. That borrowing that took place previously by the UWP government was essentially a way of reducing the medical expenses that we would have had now. So she could stand on a point of elucidation. I would love for that to happen. But I gathered from what she was saying that there was some merit in the borrowing that they had done before, because we have been telling this opposition that y'all were the ones who abused the borrowing. But when that was said, Madam President, it took me straight to the point of, well, if that was the case, I want to ask the opposition whether the $7 million, and we've heard the vaccine argument, the $7 million that was borrowed for the vaccine, how did that help to reduce on the healthcare expenditure we have today? Because we have to pay it back. We want to be responsible clients. If you borrow, when we borrow, it's not the UWP who borrows, it's not the SLP who borrows, it's the government of St. Lucia that borrows. Right. So whoever is the government of the day has a commitment to repay the debt to whoever the creditor is. And so, now that we are in government and there is outstanding debt that is chipping away at our ability to take care of the health sector, who is responsible now? So I leave that question to be answered maybe in the next debate. But for now, Madam President, I want to reaffirm this government's commitment to ensuring that our two priority areas of national security and health care are given the kind of treatment and priority that they deserve. And that this motion, accompanied by others, makes it very clear that what we need to do and what we are going to do is to continue to provide the finance, the resources, the manpower, the policy direction, and everything else that the government in its capacity can do to take better care of our health sector, our people, and to make this entire approach to managing our health care facilities and our health care system a better one. I look forward to the benefits that will be accrued to the people of the staff and the hospital, the St. Jude Hospital, the patients, and everyone who is a stakeholder. It is the hospital that I will go to if I fall sick because of where I live. And I know that the staff, the board, and everyone associated with that facility will be very happy that this government is making an effort towards assisting them with their operations. And I thank the members in this Senate for supporting this bill and that this motion, and that the people who it's intended to benefit will benefit. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of $3,500,000 from the Republic Bank, Eastern Caribbean Limited, to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. Be it further resolved that A, the repayment of the advances are on demand. B, the interest is payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate from time to time, less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum. And C, a commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move for the suspension of the Senate until 3 p.m.
Senators, the question is that this sitting of Senate be suspended until 3 p.m. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Well, the Senate has been suspended for lunch at this time, and for the morning session so far, we've heard all of the senators who made presentations, including the new senator, Senator Shelton Daniel, who was sworn in today, albeit temporary. Also, of course, well, we didn't have any presentations as such from the independent senators, but certainly the opposition senators did make some presentations, and they spoke on the bill that you just heard, 3,005 guarantee actually of 3,500. I said 3,000. I'm sorry. It is $3,500,000 to guarantee a loan on behalf of the St. Jude Hospital and for lots of works and operations of that hospital. Yo Japon anti avant ça, yo te aussi discuter ça nous a créé ça fait police, ça c'est loi 9 pour bailler police plus pouvoir à Sainte-Lucie. Je vais dire en anglais tout à l'heure que toutes ces différents sénateurs parlé à ce loan qui le gouvernement a garanti. Ce n'est pas un loan gouvernement qui a point, mais il y a une garantie à l'assurance qui il a supporté l'hôpital Saint-Jude pour et puis opération. Nous tenons un sénateur 9 bon matin, ça c'est sénateur Shelton Daniel, puis qui prend place puisqu'il a des sénateurs sur façade gouvernement qui pas présent. C'est sénateur Pauline Antoine qui a sur business gouvernement et aussi sénateur Lucia Jawahi qui pas présent aujourd'hui. So nous avons dévié ici à 2h30. À 2h30 avec ça a passé puisque il y a plusieurs différentes motions qui ont pour discuter avec Bill ici. Merci avec nous avons passer au studio nous.